Hi, Jake recaps here. Today I am going to explain one of the best movies called The Patience Stone. Somewhere in Afghanistan, in a country which torn apart by war, a 30-year-old woman looks after her paralyzed husband, whose vegetative state was caused by a bullet in his neck. Despite the shots and explosions outside of the window, woman did not leave her husband alone and takes care of him. Washing hands and face of her husband, woman sorts the rosary in her hands and turns to Allah to give strength to the man and help him cope with the disease. Trying to somehow bring her husband out of a coma, woman asks him to hold his breath. She sees that he is able to breathe, which means that he can and should listen to her. A minute later, woman realizes that her husband does not respond to her words, and this upsets her. Doctor said that in 1 or 2 weeks her husband would return to his usual image and be able to speak. Now the 16th day, but there is no improvement and man is still motionless. Only 2 daughters succeed in distracting a woman from her sick husband. Girls are very hungry and ask their mother to get food, as the bananas are over and drinking water is running out. Going out with her daughters into the yard, woman asks her neighbor if the water peddler has come and goes to the pharmacy. As soon as the family leaves the gate, armed militants drive past, shooting to the enemy. Local residents are used to living in hell. Explosions and gunshots do not frighten them at all. Woman comes to a pharmacy and asks pharmacist to give the medicine which she needs to keep her husband alive. The seller refuses to help, as she has no money and she owes him. Woman does not have the opportunity to earn money, so she returns home and instead of medicine, she gives her husband a dropper with salty sweet water, which relieves him of hunger. Despite the fact that her husband is silent, woman constantly turns to him, asks for permission to go to the store or to her aunt. Realizing that he will not answer, woman puts on a hijab and goes to visit her aunt, the only one of her relatives who did not leave the city due to incessant shelling and military clashes. She knocks on the door and asks to let her in, but an unknown woman opens the door. She does not know where is her aunt and drives her away, as she cannot help in any way. This becomes a real blow for a woman, because she realizes that she has no one else. She returns home and tells her husband about it. His brothers and mother left the city even earlier, as they were afraid of shelling. They did not take woman and her daughters, did not consider it necessary to warn that they were leaving. This offends unfortunate woman, because she knows why her husband was shot in the neck and became immobile. Exactly 16 days ago, he ran into a man who insulted his mother. It is noteworthy that the woman's husband fought against enemies for years, but received a bullet from a comrade, a compatriot who lost in a fair fight and shot in the back. Realizing that only Allah is with her, the woman continues to pray and ask Almighty to help her sick husband. She doesn't want him to leave her and can't imagine life of a single mother. Girls who are afraid of the dark manage to distract her from the conversation with her husband. There is no electricity or water in the house, so mother takes care of her daughters and lights a kerosene lamp. Little ones do not understand what is happening with their father and think that he is angry because of them. Mother reassures girls and says that everything will be fine. Returning to her husband's bedroom, woman continues to care for him, changing the water in the dropper and washing the man's body. The next morning, a doctor comes to visit and examine the wounded man. Woman does not let him into the house, justifying this by the fact that she is unclean and now she has her period. Realizing that he cannot see the wounded man, doctor asks to pray for him and promises to return in a few days. Examining the body of a lying man, woman checks his wound and realizes that it does not heal. Bullet remains in the neck of her husband, and this is terrible because she cannot understand how to help him and return him to his former life. A few minutes later, woman hears an announcement throughout the city that the people should gather at the mosque to get weapons and defend their city. She understands that there will be attacks, and a couple of moments later, the first explosion is heard. Frightened, woman runs into the basement, taking her 2 daughters with her. The neighbors also go down to the basement, but leave the wheelchair-bound man outside because they can't get him inside. While in the shelter, the locals listen to the radio to get the news and not go out until the missile attack is over. As soon as the explosions subside, woman hurries to her husband's bedroom to check if he is alive. Meanwhile, neighbors still drag the disabled man into the basement, realizing that new explosions await them. A woman puts drops in her husband's eyes and notices approaching tanks and armed enemies outside the window. They do not select targets and fire randomly to inflict maximum damage on the city. After a couple of shots, woman realizes that she needs to return to the basement and runs away to her frightened daughters. A few hours later, she returns to the house, cleans up the consequences of the shelling and seals up window that flew out from the shockwave. Realizing that this is not the end, woman returns to the girls in the basement. Meanwhile, fighters make their way into the house and notice a man lying motionless. They rob him, removing his watch and wedding ring, after which they search other rooms. There is no one else in the house, and man does not move, and they think that he is dead. Seeing that the Koran is lying next to him, militants understand that he is like them and do not touch him, calmly leaving his house. A little later, woman returns to the house and sees that there was a search, and some things were stolen. It turned out that this was not the worst thing, since the men of the neighbor were found, gutted and killed, leaving them hanging in the middle of the yard. Realizing that this can no longer continue, woman collects her things and, taking her daughters with her, goes to her aunt. She is reopened by an unknown person and driven away by the mother of 2 girls, but she refuses to leave. There is no choice, and a strange woman gives her the new address of an aunt who has moved into a hotel for easily accessible girls and women. A mother with 2 children finds an aunt who lives in the opposite part of the city and asks to look after her daughters. The aunt tells her that she was also once married. When her husband found out that she was barren, he sent her to serve his parents. The father-in-law, who learned about infertility, took the girl by force, and this continued until the moment she killed him. Having escaped, she became an easily accessible woman, but still gained her long-awaited freedom. Leaving the children and taking some money, woman returned home to her husband, as she could not leave him to die alone. At the same time, she understands why her husband's relatives left. He, like his brothers, knew about the approaching war and understood that the house was in the line of fire. Woman reproaches her husband for not telling her about this, for not warning her and the children about the impending threat. She also decides to admit that she is unhappy with the marriage. For 10 years of marriage, woman practically did not see her husband, but she was the object of adoration for his brothers. If he had died, she could have become the wife of one of them and would have been safe now. But that didn't happen. She is even more offended by the fact that her husband never paid attention to her. As a young girl, she did not marry him, but a photograph and a blade. Mother of the spouse-controlled girl, so much that she slept with her so that she would not cheat on her husband while he was at war. Woman does not understand why she tells her husband everything, but she is sure that he hears her and continues to plunge into memories. Her parents are the only example of family life that a woman had, but she can't call it good. Her father was obsessed with quails and could stroke them for hours, after which he played, arranged quail fights and bets on them. He was a terrible head of the family because he often raised his hand, both to his wife and to his daughters. Once a man spent all his money on expensive and special quails, in the hope that they would make him rich. During the duel, Bird got scared and ran away. Father could not pay his debts, so he gave his eldest 12-year-old daughter in marriage to a man to whom he lost money. Afraid of being next, the woman, as a child, took out a quail and fed it to the cat, which left scars on her face. Continuing to feel oppressed, woman decides not to tell her husband anything else and runs away to her aunt. She confesses to her that she cannot stop talking and tells terrible secrets. A relative tells woman that a paralyzed person unconsciously becomes a magical stone of patience, to which absolutely everything can be told. Once upon a time, there was a legend that a stone can withstand anything, but one day it will break into thousands of small pieces, making its owner a prophet of Allah. Realizing that her husband has not died for 3 weeks, woman decides that he is her patience stone, to whom she can tell everything she thinks. Upon returning home, woman washes her husband and kisses him for the first time in 10 years of marriage. Here she recalls the wedding night and the fact that she could not get pregnant. The mother-in-law treated her badly, so woman had to commit a bad deed, which she still cannot tell about. Soon woman hears strange sounds, but it turns out that the neighbors are burying their relatives. There is no money for the treatment of her husband, so she does not let doctor on the threshold and leaves. Soon woman returns, as the city is full of soldiers and they can kill paralyzed husband. She hides him in a niche, covering with curtains and a pillow. A few minutes later, the commander of the detachment and stuttering soldier appear in the house. Afraid that they will take her by force, woman says that she is selling her body. A Muslim considers this low and disgusting, so he does not touch her, only insulting a woman and spitting in her face. He did not suspect that she was holding a knife behind her back and was ready to kill the commander if he approached her. At night, woman goes to bed next to her husband, promising to tell all the secrets. In the morning, she hears that someone has come and hides her husband behind a screen. It turned out that the stuttering soldier had returned to her. He is young and has never had a woman, so he is ready to pay any money for a pleasant pastime. Woman tries to stop the soldier, but the guy throws money on the floor and makes love to her. After a moment of embarrassment, woman cries and tries to wash the shame off herself in the bathroom. The next morning, she decides to spend money that she has earned by ordering water, buying food and medicine for her husband. Back at home, woman puts on a drip and goes outside to do laundry. The young soldier came to visit again and is ready to generously pay for a couple of minutes spent next to a beautiful woman. After intimacy, she tells her husband about it, realizing that earlier he would have killed her for such a confession. That is why she reproaches her husband and says how terrible he is in bed. This soldier is learning, so he is better at everything, even though their meetings do not last more than 1 minute. At some point, woman realizes that such things cannot be said and is looking for the Koran in order to repent of her sins. Next morning, she notices that someone has repaired the fence. As it turned out, this is a young soldier who dreams of spending at least another minute in her arms. He is bullied by the commander, so there are cigarette burns on the guy's body. Seeing all this, woman calms and hugs guy, sincerely sympathizing with the orphan who became a soldier involuntarily. Later, woman hears an announcement around town that tells the legend of how people become prophets. She talks about this with her aunt and understands that no one is born a prophet and they also have shortcomings. Upon her return, she finds fruit and a gold chain given to her by a soldier in love. Only with him she feels like a real woman and becomes happy. Now she is trying to caress her husband, but at some point she realizes that she is acting low and atoning for sins. Realizing that it is no longer possible to hide, woman decides to tell the main secret. When she was pregnant, woman repeatedly tried to get rid of the child. At birth, she tried to strangle the girl with her feet, but she could not do it. The reason is the infertility of her husband, about which she was silent. Afraid of losing her marriage and becoming a nobody, woman met with the aunt's owner and asked to solve the problem. She passed him off as a healer, to whom his mother-in-law paid money. In fact, woman made love with men and did not know who they were because she wanted to get pregnant. Both girls are not from her husband, and she does not know who their fathers are. Having heard the terrible truth, husband comes out of a coma and tries to strangle his wife. She kills him with a knife and believes that she has become a prophetess. A young soldier who visits a woman at the wrong time becomes a witness to what is happening. And here movie ends. Thank you for watching and see you tomorrow at the same time.